Halloween here had always been pretty typical before the water house. Predictable in the way coastal towns can be, where the same decorations reappear each year from damp cardboard boxes, and nobody expects anything more frightening than a teenager tipping a pumpkin. It had been the Bennett house before, up on top of our street, where the pavement tilted gently toward the harbor, and the wind carried a constant, thin saltiness. Out front, the Bennetts grew basil beside wild blueberries, the sharp green scent of crushed leaves mingling strangely with the sweet, faint rot of fallen fruit. They kept hummingbird feeders full and dangling from their cedar shingle porch, the red plastic cylinders catching morning light. Right above Crayola-colored old buoys, everyone flanked their exterior railings with faded yellows, chipped aquas, sun-bleached oranges that knocked softly against wood when storms rolled through. I could make out the Bennetts heading to the pool each morning by sound alone, their screen doors springs stretching with a tired metallic sigh, their flip-flops smacking downhill like clucking tongues against pavement, their long swim parkas swooshing in rhythm with their steps. The Bennetts had a pool covered in their backyard, wrapped in brick and boxwoods, and perpetually dumped on by pine needles that gathered in damp corners and floated in lazy spirals across the surface. The cover sagged slightly in the middle after rain, reflecting sky in a warped oval. They preferred swimming at the club pool, though. Water here was always cold, not refreshing cold, corrective cold, the kind that tightened your scalp and made your ribs contract. We only swam in pools whose heat was paid for with membership dues, never our personal pools or the ocean itself. The ocean looked inviting from a distance, glittering under sun, but once inside it gripped your ankles like a warning, maybe in wetsuits, or regret if I was naive, a tourist, drunk, or all three. Like birds, the Bennetts headed where it was warmer, Florida. There were too many slipping hazards here, especially in snow, when brick paths glossed over with invisible ice before dawn, and Mrs. Bennett had already broken her hip. Twice, the second time, the ambulance lights had flashed red against snowbanks, and the whole street watched from behind curtains. So it ceased to be theirs, and frankly, I wasn't too bummed to see them go. They were nice and all, but they gave out peppermint patties on Halloween dense, chalky discs that numbed your tongue, and they didn't have grandkids to offer for weekend and summer play. Their house always felt paused, as if waiting for a gathering that never arrived. Interestingly, the buyer hailed from somewhere warm himself, but no kids either. Just a man and a moving truck filled with unlabeled boxes, furniture covered in grommeted sound blankets, and clear tape pulled tight enough to shine in the sun. The truck idled longer than necessary that day, exhaust curling low in the driveway. After unpacking, or whatever he did after that truck left, and the screen slammed with a final hollow snap, I saw him hang some of those blankets over his front windows, obstructing light and sound, and my snooping efforts. They swallowed the glow from inside, quieter, less normal than the Bennetts. Big Hollywood guy, Linda Carver whispered one afternoon, lowering her sunglasses like she was about to disclose classified information. Mr. Hayes. Oh, you've actually met him. The neighbors responded, their dogs barking outside Linda Carver's yard, where she'd leave a dry metal bowl they all treated as a mid-walk bullseye for their urine. Pissed, she never added water. The bowl scraped and rang whenever nudged, metallic and hollow. I had seen Mr. Hayes's silhouetted, shadowy form through those dimmed windows. A large man with dark facial hair and tinted glasses, even on overcast days when tint seemed unnecessary, ordering Chinese delivery a few times a week. The delivery cars would idle briefly, headlights washing over the cedar siding before dimming. A real recluse, only answering his door to sign for DHL packages or pick up his knotted bag of food, white and red cartons with disposable chopsticks left on his inherited doormat. The cartons sometimes steamed in the chill air before disappearing. The homemade cobblers and sourdoughs welcoming neighbors offered him went unclaimed on his porch, save for hummingbirds who jabbed into the baked berries, leaving small, precise punctures. Well, I tried, of course, Linda Carver explained. But Evelyn Grant told me everything from the sale. She paused, always trying to edge us with busybody bullshit nobody asked for, drawing out silence like it was applause. Evelyn said Mr. Hayes worked in big blockbuster films, even won an Oscar. And she said, get this, was being consulted to turn one into a roller coaster or something in Dubai. The word Dubai hung in the air like a mirage, shimmering far off, implausible against our gray shoreline. Linda Carver volunteered at the bookstore, but wasn't allowed to give customers recommendations on account of her political and erotic leanings. Still, those books weren't going to alphabetize themselves. In her plentiful spare time, she mayored us neighbors, issuing suggestions as if they were decrees. Like when it came to beautifying the traffic circle down at Street's End, after the city felled a maple and replaced it with round curbs, fresh concrete, and a gaping gray hole that collected rainwater like a shallow wound. It calmed traffic, but angered idle minds. Linda Carver CC'd all. What should we do about this? Many of us responded, volunteering our ideas, time, supplies. Another tree. How about a community or kids' garden? Yes, or a pet cemetery. Could add a plaque/dog stick library. The pool of collaboration. Linda Carver went and planted geraniums in the circle, their red heads bright and defiant against the gray concrete, then replied all. We could chip in to pay her back. Like a wave always beckoning, then washing away sandcastles, she was. Lowering her voice into a sharp little riptide, she added, Evelyn Grant told me he'd been fired. Studio shut him out. never married, nothing. He told Evelyn our town reminded him of a movie. That part lingered longer than the rest. It could have made less sense. A man moving here. A seaside slice of family-friendly suburbia, by boat or puddle jumper, where mornings smelled of brine and diesel, and afternoons ended early. The louder city over was where most new beginners migrated, stacking their lives rocks like totems. Engineers turned farm-to-table chefs, spies turned bee and bee proprietors, prostitutes turned lobstermen. Reinvention thrived there. Here lived mostly leftover seniors and content families, offspring watered down from humble boating industries, the sorts to watch the water ebb and flow, freeze and thaw, and ultimately make the most of and live off its idyllic majesty without demanding spectacle. Artists came from miles to paint this rocky coastline, to capture the lighthouse at sunrise when fog clung low, or sunset when the sky bruised purple and gold. High tide, low tide. The lighthouse drew me in and out, I suppose. Its steady rotation felt like breath, predictable, measured. And so I stopped wondering about him. The first few retrieved their pectat pie dishes, embarrassed at their own persistence. The short-lived excitement of Mr. Hayes's newness washing up into our lives eroded, sand slipping back into its original grooves, and I resumed my focus inward. Summer days lingered thick and slow. Back-to-school hustles returned with bus brakes screeching and sneakers slapping pavement. Temperatures dipped, and the leaves themselves started to forget green, shifting ruby and citrine and burnt orange. That basil shriveled from dehydrated neglect, curling inward, shifting dead. High tide, low tide. Enrolled another October off the coast, dreamy and dewy and watercolored, as far as New England scenery goes. The mornings arrived wrapped in thin mist, the kind that hovered low over lawns before burning away reluctantly. The air held that particular sharpness that hinted at frost, but hadn't yet committed. Pumpkins, some carved too soon, plopped outside vestibules, their grins already softening at the edges, lids sinking inward as fruit flies hovered. Cinnamon and squash scents, heated over cast irons, warmed the breeze still blowing through screens on their last stretch of buffering the salty elements this year. Windows stayed cracked just a little longer than they should have, holding onto the illusion of mildness. Most families put up store-bought decorations, inflatable witches or spiders assembled with Allen wrenches, their nylon bodies flapping weakly in afternoon wind before inflating proudly at dusk. Linda Carver dragged out her old black cat flag, the fabric slightly faded at the tail, fussing over nobody mounting it for her, despite her snootily declining several dads, and one mom's offers to assist. She preferred martyrdom to gratitude. Still waters run deep, they say. One morning mid-October, I woke to see he'd also decorated, wrapped his property in shiny caution tape, layered thick from mailbox to porch rail to tree trunk, crisscrossed in deliberate angles. It fluttered violently in the coastal wind, snapping sharply like applause. This titillated the older kids especially. I knew it. It's gonna be sick. A real haunted house, Riley Thompson said, practically vibrating in her skeleton hoodie. We started buzzing even more than our October baseline, speculating Mr. Hayes would create the most spectacular haunted house. Professional props, industrial fog machines, motion-triggered screams, special effects that would blow all our cheap lawn ornaments out of the water. Who knew? We hadn't understood how Hollywood worked, and this, at least, made sense now. A man from Blockbusters surely wouldn't settle for cobweb spray and rubber bats. October had that kind of escalating, intoxicating effect on us. Candy apple thick with anticipation. Even the adults seemed slightly loosened, forgiving sugar highs and extended bedtimes. October 31 arrived, and the excitement for dusk was palpable. Crunchy, leaves fractured under sneakers. Breath showed faintly in shaded corners. In recent years, the Arts Committee asked the lighthouse keepers to play along, putting colored film over its bulb, like pink in February, green in December, orange today. The old white beam felt transformed, theatrical. Even before the film went up and the sun went down, everything was cast in an orange haze. The sky leaned copper. Window glass glowed amber. Even faces seemed warmer, unreal. The schools held parades, staggered across the morning, pageant-walking costumes, and face paint at their peak pristineness to be awed and photographed. Teachers clapped. Parents crouched low with phones, capes still unwrinkled, glitter not yet smeared. At dinner time, parents fed their children apples and pizza and carrots and more apples at designated pre-party homes, negotiating sugar intake like diplomats. Juice boxes crinkled, paper plates bent. We readied ourselves to flood our streets. First, Mr. Thompson put orange cones out, sedating, not just calming traffic that evening, as if preparing for something larger than foot traffic. At long last, trick-or-treat time. In a cacophony of screeching kids and screen doors slamming and Thriller leaking from some boombox down the block, the costumed masses poured out, filling our dam-stopped road. Trick or treat. Fat baby pumpkins wobbling in fleece. Trick or treat. Scarved and scarred wizards gripping plastic staffs. Trick or treat. Toddling, chromatized princesses in flammable gowns and plastic crowns that would snap in half mid-tantrum, already tilting sideways. Trick or treat. Boys with pillowy muscles patting their sleeves and tummies, flexing under porch lights. The one little kid, dressed as Diane Keaton, all blacks and whites and chunky frames, won my heart that night. Tiny tie, oversized vest, a seriousness beyond her years. The Hendersons made fog from dry ice, thick white vapor spilling across their lawn and curling around ankles. That one overzealous family were mudrunners this year. Inflatable, start/finish, arch wobbling under string lights and obstacles scattered across their grass. Their kids spit-yelled into a bullhorn, cheering their costumed, belly-laughing peers to complete their bear crawls and knee lifts to earn their treats. Parents filmed, someone tripped, nobody cared. It was magical. Ding-dong, trick or treat. But kids eventually ran out of houses. Porch lights dimmed one by one. Candy bowls lightened. So the first brave kid, a ninja, Ethan Miller, finally ninja walked up to Mr. Hayes's door. A huddle of tiny cartoons. Colby's ring, Ethan's ring set off a blast. A jolt that boomed so strong the Waterhouse windows shattered outward in violent shards, and the ground shook beneath our sneakers. It wasn't theatrical. It was seismic. The air punched outward. A car alarm went off somewhere down the block, wailing. I screamed. Luckily, Ethan's ninja reflexes spared him injury from any ninja star-like shooting glass. He had crouched instinctively, arms over his head, as fragments scattered across the porch and lawn. Holy hell, Ethan, Mr. Hayes, are you okay? Someone shouted. Two nearby dads ran upstream through the children to the house, whose bones were creaking audibly now, wood groaning under internal pressure. Ethan and his cartoon pack ran, their dropped candy buckets rolling across pavement, scattering chocolate bars and gummy worms into the street. I thought I heard something else in there, beneath the ringing in my ears. Like rumbling, or more of a hissing or gushing sound, something alive and pressurized. Was that really an explosion, or some fucked up special effect? Mr. Hayes, someone called again, voice cracking. But then, like a flag in a storm, the screen's frame began flapping, pushed by water forcing itself out. But then, like a flag in a storm, the screen's frame began flapping harder, the metal bending outward under strain, pushed by water forcing itself out. The men started backing away, one teetering uneasy in heels, nearly losing footing on scattered glass. And the sound behind that door was no longer subtle. It was building. The water released itself, first through the door, not spilling, but forcing. A muscular shove that bowed the frame outward, then out windows, seeping through blankets, darkening fabric before bursting past it, down the hill, along the sidewalks, in widening sheets. It carried splinters, insulation, glittering glass. It moved with intention. That empty metal bowl scraped the pavement as it was finally wetted and carried away, spinning once, ringing hollow before being swallowed by the surge. The orange cones toppled and disappeared too, their reflective stripes flashing briefly beneath the surface like drowning signals. Parents yelled for their children. Names tore from throats raw and urgent. Past the glass shards riding the wave, The drag queen threw off his heels without hesitation and picked up an Elsa, frozen in fear, her glittered cape already heavy with water. One stiletto drifted past like a broken fin. You need at least 2 extraordinary surprises for a scare. Only one explosion. People doubt what they experienced. They rewrite it. Electrical, gas line, prank. There must be 2. The second waterhouse explosion broke the dam of uncertainty. Its loud blast didn't just echo, it entered, reverberated in my veins, rattled my molars, pressed against my spine. So strong, it quaked beyond the block, beneath the street, shaking the pines and maples and oaks, and floorboards several houses away. Car alarms erupted in uneven chorus. Porch lights trembled. Trees dropped cones in abrupt surrender. Clinging colored leaves lost their grip, cascading down in frantic showers before being violently washed away. Sections of siding tore loose. Parts of the waterhouse came undone, not collapsed entirely, but peeled, as if the structure were shedding skin under pressure. A deluge? Different neighbors described it differently later. Surge, wall, torrent, biblical. But we were all sopping wet within seconds. Water-soaked denim and fleece and fake velvet gowns. Face paint streaked downward into grotesque new expressions. Pop-starred mothers used panic. Voices cracked. It was exactly like the flood at Universal Studios, Brooke said later, still shaking, mascara clumped beneath her eyes. We're all doing our normal trick-or-treating thing, but then we heard the first loud BOOM and stopped and turned around and saw up at Hayes's house. Ethan was crouching, his mom really screaming, super loud, ETHANNN. And then it was freaky, like, were we all going to die? But some of us noticed water glugging out from inside the house. It was flooding. We were like, what the heck is happening? And it was thrilling and terrifying. Her hands moved as she spoke, slicing through air like she was still pushing water aside. And you could kinda hear pipes, or I don't know what, something bursting. And it literally reminded me of Universal Studios, that flood, right? And then the second bomb happened, and it was even bigger and louder, and more parents started screaming, trying to get their kids, dropping their phones and ripping through the water. And it was really happening, this humongous flood, right? Just a huge bursting torrential wave from that house, and no idea how or why. But suddenly, it was everywhere and nonstop, and our whole block started flooding up fast, higher and higher. She swallowed hard, and a lot of us were panicking, like, oh shit, sorry, about all of our stuff. This is going to totally wreck our houses, right? But also, this is really dangerous for the littlest kids. We gotta try to make sure everybody, the people, are gonna be okay, right? The flood went everywhere, man. We couldn't even think it was so fast and supercharged like on a ride aliphacidin, except it was real, and our street was fucking drowning. Right? A deluge. High tide, higher tide. An unnatural disaster caused by a re-rigging of pipes and pumps and dark magic beneath the waterhouse, masterminded by a man who'd been paid and awarded for blowing things up, then thrown out to sea and told that would be all. Mr. Hayes had a black belt in building catastrophe and a whole ocean to pull water in from for his final, redemptive, board-breaking blockbuster. He knew spectacle. He knew scale. He knew how to make people look up. It couldn't be stopped for hours. Not by dads forming chains. Not by firefighters dragging hoses against a tide that didn't need more water. Not by plumbers who later stood stunned, shaking their heads at diagrams and pressure readings. And I saw it all. First, the ground covered in a gushing sheet, thin and deceptive. Then the children starting to lose their footing, sneakers sliding on pavement turned slick, crying sharp and confused. The lightest items, synthetic crap, were flushed away first. Schools of plastic pumpkins bumping into each other like stunned fish. Fairy wands spinning helplessly. Cauldrons filling and flipping. Lightsabers blinking weakly beneath the surface before dying. Footballs bobbing absurdly in the chaos. Candy buckets bobbed in the flood, their contents dissolving into streaks of sugar. Drenched fake spiderwebbing became white kelp, tangling around ankles and mailbox posts like hair pulled from a drain. Old lobster buoys ripped free from railings, knocking into trash bins. Hummingbird feeders shattered, red syrup bleeding into brown water. Gone. The current swept the children away next. That was when the sound changed, panic replacing novelty entirely. It was the ones in the inflatable costumes everyone most worried about. Too buoyant, too slow to steer, too hard to grab. Parents lunged and slipped, arms outstretched. Down at Block's end in the traffic circle, the water first followed the road's curve, obedient for a breath, bending along the curb as if respecting the boundary, then flooded up well over it. Those geraniums were decimated instantly, red petals tearing free, soil clouding into murk. All the Henderson's dry ice turned to mystical white gas, carbon dioxide fogging the tree line and drifting low across the flood's surface. It looked theatrical, almost staged, except for the screaming. Nothing come about that. Orange and purple lights were the first to flicker and fade, bulbs shorting in sparks before dying. Then, in all that sudden quieter darkness, the cold water was louder somehow than everyone shouting, crying, splashing. It roared against siding, sloshed into basements, gurgled through storm drains already overwhelmed. The orange beams of the lighthouse cast recurring shadows through the trees and rooflines, sweeping across fragments, a drifting witch hat, a father waist-deep carrying 2 children, a dog paddling frantically, but were too far apart in the rush of the flood for me to rely on, to to find something lost in or pulled away by the current. Between sweeps, there was only black water. All I could see was my wet breath in front of me. It was terrifying and beautiful, chillingly haunting, all that I saw. The street had become something otherworldly, reflective, and violent at once. I saw it from my roof, across from the water house. The shingles beneath me were damp with mist and spray. The flood didn't get that high, but it wouldn't have made a difference if it had. It got pretty high, though, for a man-made flood and all. High enough to swallow car tires, high enough to push porch furniture loose, high enough to erase the line between street and sea. I saw the news vehicles coming, first in a helicopter overhead, its blades chopping the mist into frantic swirls, spotlight slicing across rooftops. Then, later in vans, parked a couple blocks over as the water drained, slowly making its way back home in reluctant currents. The cameramen flashed bright lights on everything, soaked costumes, shattered windows, stunned faces. And before going live, the newswoman removed her cat ears, but still had faint whisker marks on her cheeks people with HD could make out if they tried. She shivered once before the red light blinked on, and still the water moved. In the moonlight, I saw neighbors' possessions float out of their homes and into the street canal. The water had settled into a slow-moving current by then, no longer explosive, but persistent, tugging everything loose from its former place. Mostly sad stuff, like pizza boxes collapsing into pulp, sippy cups spinning lid first, clothes blooming outward like jellyfish, shampoo bottles knocking against one another, books swelling and opening their spines helplessly, magazines fanning apart, dolls staring blankly upward, and all those apples, bruised, bobbing, shining faintly under the lighthouse beam before disappearing downstream. I saw, next door, a couple thick dildos flop up to the surface and bob along out from Linda Carver's bedroom. They surfaced slowly, almost ceremonially, bumping against a floating laundry basket before drifting free. If I'd been any more high, that image might have really made me trip balls. You never consider their buoyancy when freed from a nightstand drawer. They seemed absurdly calm amid the wreckage, as if they belonged to some different, private disaster. I often went up on my roof to get a little high, trying to quiet the noise of my life down inside, get the volume just right in my mind. The roof shingles were warm in summer, brittle in winter, always slightly gritty beneath my palms. From up there, I could see past our block, across the promenade toward the coastline, some parts into town, like the theater's steeple blinking in neon pink and yellow, stubborn and theatrical, even on quiet nights. And even out further, I'd hypnotize myself, mesmerized by the lighthouse, its steady sweep cutting through dark like breath, reliable, indifferent. When that wasn't enough, I'd turn my gaze downward, across the street, and watch the strange man doing something secretive in his new basement. I'd seen flickers through small gaps before he sealed everything tight, sparks flashing blue-white behind a welding mask, quick bursts like captive lightning. He worked late, long after delivery trucks left and porch lights went out, making something, assembling something, with whatever came in all those boxes he kept signing for. Halloween night, I saw him again. On his roof, too, pulling at a lever he'd made down to the pool in his backyard. The mechanism ran like a line into darkness, taut and purposeful. He braced his stance slightly as he pulled, not rushed, not frantic, deliberate. I saw him, his glasses tucked into his collar, the whites of his eyes reflecting the lighthouse's orange sweep as he looked up toward the moon, just before the second explosion. His face wasn't twisted in madness. It wasn't smiling either. It was focused, measuring. I saw him wait for the water levels to drop in his backyard before he escaped through a secret door he'd carved in those boxwood hedges. The hedge opened like a seam, a dark slit swallowing him whole. He didn't run wildly. He slipped away, calculated. I saw him up there on the roof, this transplant from Hollywood, who'd once upon a time been the SFX master of the world. Watch his masterpiece below tier, apart our little block, with his naked eyes alone. He didn't film or photograph any of it. No phone raised, no tripod, just observation, ownership. I don't think he considered himself a terrorist. Maybe he was no different than the visiting painters who set up easels at dawn. Maybe he was offering up real action for those seeking the fantastic on Halloween, otherwise let down by bales of hay and tarped scenery. Maybe he believed fear deserved authenticity. That spectacle required consequence. I think this, you see, because I saw him wearing a red clown nose that night. Bright, unmistakable, or I don't know. I was pretty high. I know what you're wondering. Besides where all the water came from, like I said, the sea pipes rerouted, pumps manipulated, and we still don't fully know. The investigators aren't sharing their findings in the interest of public safety. And how bad the damage was. Pretty bad. Drywall peeled, basements ruined, cars totaled, childhood bedrooms swollen and warped. But folks around here had insurance for this, living near the coast and all. We signed those papers expecting wind and surge someday. Well, we all did except for a few who got fucked and had to move down to Florida, too. Full circle, in a way. Warmth calling the displaced. The city put a tree in the traffic circle, though. Out of pity, seems. Taller than the geraniums ever were. They planted it with ceremony, cameras present, soil still damp. Nobody died or anything. They just hospitalized some littler kids to ensure no secondary drownings in the earliest hours of November. Lungs monitored, blankets wrapped tight, so they didn't have to put up any real plaques or cemeteries. Also,